And so, most importantly, that relationship between spouses is going to be affected by our behavior as individuals and our way of dealing with everything. So it's always a good idea to try to sit down and think about, how can I be better at offering up X, Y, or Z? Say we have a difficulty with patience. How can we become more patient? Well, there's always a step. There's always a series of things that we must do and should do. First step is always going to be the external expression of that impatience. So that's the first thing we work on, the first thing we shut up. We don't let ourselves speak, and we try to suffocate as much as possible any facial changes or anything else. We just let ourselves learn to be as calm as possible. That can take many different forms. Work on our breathing, focus half of our mind on something else, just put up with whatever. But then we have to start working on the inside. And that is, whatever it is that is causing us this lack of patience. It could be, my wife knows I hate it when she does this, and yet she still does it. Let's take that. Let's take that for a, she knows I hate too much salt in the food. Why is she always putting too much salt in the food? Okay. Well, then the next step, apart from not expressing that as clearly or as brutally or as bluntly as we would like to, is, okay, why did she do this? Is it because maybe it tastes insipid to her? Maybe she doesn't understand that I don't like it. I haven't expressed it. I've just grunted and groaned a lot about it. Maybe I haven't, whatever. It could be any number of things. Try to internalize it, analyze it, figure out a way forward with it. So it's not enough to just kind of hold it in. Try to work it out on the inside of how you're going to make it better, but with the other person. Sometimes it's just a question of, I just hate it when he keeps telling me these inane stories. Why can't he just leave me alone sometimes? Give me some quiet time. Maybe tell him that, but nicely. Don't just grumble and find an excuse to run to the bathroom for 20 minutes and to get away. Whatever it may be, find a way to deal with it, but a way that deals with it as a unit. So whatever these imperfections are, whatever the personal problems are, whatever the crises may be, whatever the difficulties and sacrifices we may be called to make on just a simple daily level, we must understand the fact of the matter is that because it affects the two as a unit, it needs to also be solved by the two as a unit. One of the worst problems in the world right now, especially for marriages, is the fact that there is so little communication between spouses. Sometimes that's just not possible. Unfortunately, many marriages get to that point where it's just not possible where you can have an open conversation. Well, that's unfortunate. But then how do we fix that problem? There is a way back. For most marriages that are in trouble or have difficulties, there are, shall we say, rehabilitations that can be worked out. Therapy, talking to a priest, just making a series of concessions one to the other, second honeymoon, whatever, trying to figure out how to, shall we say, reignite a little bit of the love and affection and whatever else that was supposed to be the bonding and binding reason why you got married in the first place. But it always requires a simple element, sacrifice. I love this person so much, and I desire their salvation so much, I'm willing to X. I'm willing to whatever. Sometimes that means literally just being quiet and not being anywhere near that person. And if that's what is the situation, and if that's the best that you can offer up for them, offer it up with all your heart. But sometimes it is a simple conversation. It's not easy to make concessions or to come to a negotiation table of what should be your kitchen table, right? To try to come to an agreement over something when you know you're right, by gum. But sometimes that's what's necessary. The idea is simply the question of what is needed for me to give at this moment, what is best for my marriage. What must I give? Because at the end of the day, sacrifice is the only thing that's going to keep things moving. It's the only grease that keeps the gears flowing. Without sacrifice, everything dries up, everything falls apart, everything breaks. It should be mutual. Now, of course, everyone knows the tremendous example of Saint Monica. She was a convert. She married a fairly wealthy Roman citizen, and he was a drunk, horribly abusive to her, and whatever else. Now, at the time, unfortunately, abuse, it was not a punishable offense because a patrician, a father, was considered to have absolute authority and power over his family. So, but while all the wives who would meet up at the local well or the bathing areas or whatever else would show off their bruises and complain about them and throw their and tell horrible stories about their husbands, St. Monica tended to hide her bruises from everybody else. Nobody knew about them. And she protected his reputation. Now, again, in our day and age, that's not necessary, thank God. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go through that. However, so again, take the modern lens off, as it were, and try to imagine what it was like back in the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. But the result of that was the fact that even though everyone knew that he was a terrible character and that he was a horrible person and that he treated her horribly, everyone respected his reputation remained intact. His public reputation remained intact, and he was considered to be more honorable because he had a good woman protecting him. And he openly tried to corrupt the soul of their only son, Augustine. He openly introduced him into a life of sin and encouraged that sinfulness, while his mother, being a good Catholic, was trying desperately to try to protect him and shield him from that. And by the way, St. Augustine has very little nice to say about his father, while he has wonderful things to say about his mother at the end of his life. The reason for that is very simple, because everything she did, everything she put up with, how much she protected her family, her husband, as much as she protected her child, everything that she did was done in an act of sacrificial love. One great act of sacrificial love. The tears that she shed, the harangues that she went on against St. Ambrose to try to convert her son, the many prayers and pleadings that she had to God through countless nights, the petitions that she lodged, the way that she suffered and offered up all of her sufferings, everything that she did was one great act of love. And at the end of his life, her abusive husband converted and asked her forgiveness. Does that excuse everything he did to her before? Of course not. But at the same time, what an amazing victory. What an amazing victory, and won entirely by her patience and perseverance. The fact of the matter is, that's an obviously extreme example of the kind of sacrifice we're talking about. We need to have a spirit of sacrifice that is so absolute that we must do what is right for our relationship, and we must be willing to give almost anything it takes. And the example that we have of this is the Holy Family itself. Christ came into this world specifically to suffer and die and sacrifice himself for all of us. And as one writer pointed out, at the very least, he would have done so just for the fact of being able to just for the fact of being able to save his mother. Because yes, while she was born before his suffering and death, she was liberated, shall we say, preventatively from original sin and all sins by the merits of his crucifixion and death. And so therefore, as one writer said, I don't remember who it is, that he would have done it just for that purpose alone, just for his family. He would have sacrificed himself to that level. And St. Joseph is a brilliant example of the kind of sacrifice we are talking about. He didn't understand how all of this was possible. He just knew that Our Lady was beyond reproach, and he accepted the fact that her child was not going to be his in a natural way. He understood that she was absolutely faithful to him, and he understood that this is something that was bigger than himself. And he was silent about it, and he accepted it as such. Obviously, it created a lot of confusion. The fact that he was getting these weird dreams of angels appearing to him and telling him, okay, go take your wife into your house, or go to Egypt now and then come back when I tell you. Those kinds of weird dreams which would just pop up, and he would just have to blindly do. Obviously, a life of great suffering, sacrifice, generosity, because he understood the importance of what he was doing. So when we consider what it means to be married, we have to understand the greatness of the labor that is involved. When you got married, you took upon yourselves the labor of participating directly in the creation and salvation of lives. Now, one thing that's very important, the very first life that you have to save, that you created the moment you were married, is actually the life of your family. At that moment, a new entity was created, and that is the family, whatever it may be. That did not exist before. God created it. And this is why, according to many theologians, each family has a specific guardian angel for the family. Each individual has their own guardian angel, but there is a familial guardian angel as well, because it is a different entity. And so it just makes sense. Each and every one of us, the moment that one of us gets married to another person, we don't cease to be the individuals that we are, but then we become something more. We become the individual of this entity, this family. A husband does not lose his identity, but he becomes, as that individual, part of a greater, more perfect identity. A wife, when she marries, does not lose who she is, but she becomes a part of something bigger. So there is a certain sacrifice automatically involved of being part of something bigger. But there's also a sacrifice involved of understanding that we're not the be-all and end-all. This isn't about my happiness. This isn't about my joy, my pleasure, my anything. This is about what must be. This family was created by God in the service of God. And so therefore, that is how that married life must be lived. And again, everybody's in different circumstances. So everybody needs to approach that marriage from those particular circumstances. And that marriage needs to be sanctified in the particular way that you have available to you to practice it here and now. And the sacrifices that you will have to offer will vary according to your specific circumstances. It could be that you've got 50 years of marriage. So now, your married life is very different from what it was when you were 20 years old. Could be that you have 10 kids already and whatever else. And so your married life is a very different situation. It could be that you haven't had a child yet. It could be that you're not quite married yet. There aren't any not married here, so it's okay. But it could be any number of things, whatever may be the circumstance. May have come recently into the church, maybe about to come into the church. But your sacrifices for your marriage will be specific to your circumstances and to your relationship with your spouse as you have it right now. But any sacrifice to be worth its weight and to be worth the effort of what it engenders comes from love. Now, when we think about love, we automatically think about affection. Those are two separate things. Love is a voluntary act. affection is a sentiment. So when we love somebody, it means that we want what is best for them. And so that is what we give of ourselves to the one that we love. We give what is best of ourselves to the other person. Not because they deserve it, not because it's good for me or what I can get out of it, but because it is what is necessary for that person. It is what is good for that person. It is important, it is crucial for us to understand that difference. Sacrifice born of whatever will always be empty. Sacrifice born of love will always be living and will always be fruitful. Maybe not the fruit that we want, maybe not when we want, etc., but it will always happen. So marriage should be based upon love. Unfortunately, usually it's based upon attraction, affection, sentiment, passion, whatever. And those are actually not contradictory to love. But what they are is imperfect forms or versions of what we consider to be love. So we can be very affectionate or very passionate or very whatever, but the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, when passion calms down, when affection dries up a little bit, when all the other aspects of those passions start to dissipate and disappear with time, becoming accustomed to each other, with just age, whatever else, then what? You have to have something underneath. And while those are the superficial things that we are looking for, we will never be satisfied in our marriage. But the moment that we appreciate that those things are just superficial aspects of something far deeper, far more important, and more essential, which is love, which is desiring and searching for and giving the best of what would be best for that person, then we'll be okay.